Hey, Kathy,
Yes.
I'm looking here how to allow people to do their
board meeting to order. I'm not going to read any of this stuff about why we're having it on Zoom. I'm just going to go right to, first I want to welcome everybody. And I suppose we could do some introductions or roll call here at the beginning. So I'm Jason Lehman, I'm present. And then Sam, if you want to call on everybody else.
Senator Carter, would you like to introduce yourself to the group and give them some background on you? Because we're showing you on mute. Okay. There we go.
Did that get it?
There we go.
Oh, you can hear me, Sam? I've been hearing you guys all the time, but my system was not working. Thank you, technician.
You're welcome.
I'm there now. Here I am, Sam.
Did you want to share your picture with you on the video?
Which one, Sam?
I just said, do you want to go ahead and click? I just sent you a message. You want to click something on video so people can see you?
Did that work?
There you go.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
So why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody on the board who you are, what you're about, and why you chose to be nominated for the mayor's designee.
Well, I say good afternoon to everyone. Again, you know that I'm Margaret Carter. I'm honored to be among you and to be able to serve on the board with you. I spent 27 years in the Oregon legislature, both in the House and the Senate, and worked as president and CEO of the Urban League of Portland. And then I also worked as the Senate co-chair committee of the Ways and Means Committee, which is our budget committee. And so I'm accustomed to budgetary items and reading them and have some understanding, but a little behind times now because it's been 9 years since I have had to read a public budget. But I'm sure that with your expertise and that I will catch up soon, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to serving with you because I think that this is an honor to be able to continue to serve my community at the city level. So thank you for the invitation to all of you. I look forward. Thanks, Sam. Are we off again?
No, I think we're still on, Chair. I think we should tell everybody, keep your mics on mute unless you're speaking, please. And Sam, are you back on?
I'm back on here. So why don't we just start with, have James go. He's the next newest board member. Okay, I'm not.
Know better by now. Hi, I'm James Wong. Nice to meet our new chair, and it's a pleasure to serve on this committee. Like Sam said, I'm I'm one of the newest members, and I'm looking forward to again serving the community by participating as a board member.
Thank you, James. Christopher, you're our next in line for newest member. So why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, Chris Culp here. I've been representing the PPA for, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 months, I guess. Enjoying it so far. Tons of information that I have to go through, but it's exciting learning the back and forth with it all. And thank goodness for Stacy Jones and her assistance with keeping me up to speed.
So Catherine, you're up.
Catherine,
You're on mute, Catherine. You're on mute.
Well, then I'm going to hang up my phone. I called.
There you go.
I was hoping to use my phone, but it's not working. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Well, we just lost you. When you hung up, we lost you, Catherine.
Yeah, we can't hear you. We could hear you when you were holding your headset earlier.
Yeah, you can try your headset back on, Catherine, and we'll see what we can do.
Many, many steps to get
There
here.
you go. There you go.
All right, I'm going to give up using my phone. I like to use it because it's got a headset and it makes my voice clearer, but I'll use the computer from now on. Catherine McLeod, citizen trustee. I've been on the board for a few years. My professional background is as an actuary that works on pension and retiree health issues. So that's what I bring uniquely to the board.
Thank you. Franco, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Franco Luchin, City Attorney's Office. I'm FPDR's legal advisor. Welcome, Chair Carter. Thank you for your service.
Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Lauren Downhauer. I'm the outside legal counsel for the trust. I'm a benefits attorney who specializes in benefits plans like the Fire and Police Fund.
Thank you. We have a couple names here. I'll just say who they are. We have Julie Hall. She's one of our administrative people. She helps us take notes and keeps the show running in the background. Then Julie Chris, she's our business systems analyst. She's also in the background to make sure we keep the meeting running. If everything's running smooth, you won't hear from those two. If they do, we'll introduce you. And then Kathy, do you want to go ahead and quickly introduce yourself?
Sorry, taking notes here. Kathy Gakisaka, I'm the senior legal advisor. Welcome, Senator Carter. I'm so excited to be working with you. And I am doing the minutes right now. Thank you.
And then we have, I don't know if we have two attendees that are just monitoring the meeting. We'll provide testimony later. We have Nelson Hall. He'll introduce himself when he has an opportunity to speak, as well as Jacob Clark, the union president for the Portland Police Command Officers Association. So they'll both be speaking later and they'll introduce themselves then. And then just for your information, you'll see there are two other things that are called open signal. They're the ones that help monitor and make sure the recording's working fine and that we are subtitled in the live view, the streaming view. So they help us keep the subtitles going. So that's why you see their names appearing here. Okay, Jason, I think we're done with all the introductions.
Well, I'll chime in really quickly, Sam, to introduce
Okay.
myself. I'm Kim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm Kim Mitchell, the FPDR Disability Program Manager. And I also want to extend a welcome to you, Chair Carter, and to the new trustees. Thank you.
And I guess I should, if Kim was going to, I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Stacy Jones. I'm the FPDR Deputy Director, but I manage the finances and the pension plan. And I too am very excited to work with you, Chair Carter. I met you 25 years ago because my first job was in the Oregon Senate. I won't say which senator I worked for because that might be too partisan, but I don't expect you to remember me, but I remember you. Anyway, glad to work with you again.
My pleasure.
Thank you. You'll be hearing a lot more from Kim and Stacy during the presentation as we go forward. So back to you, Jason.
Okay, thanks, Sam. I'm glad I made you do the introductions. You're the ones in trouble now.
Jason, just one thing.
Oh, go ahead, Chair.
When the mayor asked me to do this and I saw all you wonderful people on here, it kind of scared me. I said, God, I'm going to be among the peons in this group called this talent. And so I want you to really know I am excited to be able to be your chair and to work with you and to learn.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. And I don't think all of that was true, but I appreciate it. I think we know that you have many skills and abilities and we'll be taking advantage of those. So thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay. So the first item that we'll go over today is just the approval of minutes from the July meeting, and everyone should have got a copy of those to take a look at them to decide if some of us were there, some of us weren't. So the people that were there any amendments, corrections, changes to the minutes from July 27th? So hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from July 27th, 2021.
Mr. Chairman, I so move.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second. This is James.
Thank you, James. And we have a second from James. No need for discussion. So all those in favor to approve the minutes, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Can I have
Any-
one question?
Go ahead.
I'm filled with questions.
Absolutely.
Now, was the amendment that was sent in a part of this motion, or is it for an item that comes up later?
Yeah, that will be, I think it's resolution 539, which was action item number 3. I didn't see any amendments to the minutes, unless there was something. Sam, did something else come in?
Thank you.
Not for the minutes.
Okay. Very good. So is there anybody opposed to the approval of the minutes?
Hey, Sam, Chris Culp here. I wasn't present.
Pardon me?
I wasn't present at the last meeting to approve
Okay.
the minutes.
Okay. So we have nobody opposed, so the minutes are approved as presented. I guess we're going to public comment period now. So Kathy or Sam, do we have somebody signed up?
No, there's no signups for general public comments.
And there'll be an opportunity for individual resolutions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess the next item is resolution number 537, item 1. Sam, are you taking this?
Sam, you're on mute.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, so resolution 537 is to amend our technical contract with Piracle. Piracle is a company that provides us with an application called Create a Check that we use for banking purposes, including generating paper checks. And yes, we still generate paper checks. Almost all our pension payments are direct deposit, but we still have a few old timers that want to keep the paper check. Our vendors are predominantly paid with paper checks, especially medical vendors. And our biweekly disability, with a few exceptions, is all paid by paper. So we still have to continue. We're going to try to see if we can change that, but that's difficult to move everybody over to direct deposit. So this contract extends the existing maintenance and support contract through July 30 of 2022. Interestingly, there's no additional monies needed to fund this contract because we have money left over from, we put a not to exceed amount on the contract when we first wrote it, and there's still $5,600 left on that amount. And that is less than we need to pay Piracle for the next year's amount of work. So we don't need to ask for more money on this contract. So it's just basically agreeing that they'll provide the service through July 30 of 2022. There is an interesting side note to this is that Piracle will not support Create a Check after July 2022. So we're in the process of finding a replacement application, and we'll be looking at our processes for doing the banking and the paper checks for them. But we will be coming back to you probably with another contract with a different vendor to provide this service that Piracle does through their Create a Check application. The contract has been approved by Create a Check, so there's no further negotiations. We just need the board's approval with this contract. Again, there's no money going out the door for it. It just allows us to continue to work with them for through July of next year.
Sam, do you need a You need somebody to put that forward?
Well, I'll ask for, on behalf of Jason, yes, if you guys want to put a motion to approve it, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve Resolution 537. Do we have a second?
A second?
And we have a second. Any more discussion? Sam, do you want to go over, I might have missed it, but do you want to go over the actual, was the cost of $5,000+? I didn't catch that part.
Well, that's how much is left on the existing contract, and that is less than we need to continue the contract. So we are not asking for any more money on this contract.
Okay, thank you very much. So any more discussion?
So that's a pretty good deal.
Prepaid.
Exactly.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of Resolution 537 as presented, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Hearing no opposition, the vote carries and we approve Resolution 537. Thank you, Sam. The next resolution is resolution number 538, and I assume Sam will be taking this one also.
Yes, I will. So 538 is for a new contract with Online Business Systems. This is a company that we have had on prior contracts that provide support and maintenance to our FPDR database. Our database is a SQL database with a house-built application sitting on top of it. I call it that way. This database houses all the FPDR data needed to process and pay our disability and pension benefits. It also, through that application, supports the numerous processes needed to manage and pay the disability claims and pension claims with it. So this is the heart and core of FPDR. It allows us to retain data, use the data, and it gives us an application to do the work that we need to do to get benefits out to our members. So as I said before, this is a new contract. It is not an extension. The reason why we went with the new contract, the prior contract, which was written 10 years ago, had another clause in it. It covered the initial build of the database. Well, the database is built, so all we need is for support and maintenance of the database. So that's why we went to a new contract to get a more targeted statement of work. The not to exceed amount for this contract is $750,000. This is a fee for service contract. So we only will pay OBS on the agreed work that they do. So they'll charge us a certain amount annually for the maintenance and support work. Plus they will bill us, I believe it was what, $130 an hour for additional work that we ask them to do. And we often have them make some corrections and mistakes or add some extra features to the database. So the last 5 years, our actual cost was $450,000. We wrote this up to $750,000 just to for contingency. For example, contingency, if we come in with the create a check replacement, we may have to create a new interface between it and the database so we can get data back and forth between the application. Our business technical systems group will update their equipment and servers. And sometimes when they do that, we have to come in and upgrade our application to fit with their new equipment and servers and city programs. So that's why we create that extra contingency. Again, we're not going to use $750,000. We're going to use the amount that we need to for the support, maintenance, and any of the extra features we need built onto it. So us getting the $750,000, I think is very remote, because like I said, we did $450,000 the last 5 years, but we prefer to have the contingency in there so we don't have to keep coming back to you for an extension should we have some big project that comes in and requires quite a bit of their time. OBS is reviewing their contract. They've agreed to our statement of work and to the cost, the $750,000 cost. As you know, with the contract, you saw how big it is. There's always back and forth for some of the components of that contract. The attorneys like to go back and forth with it. They're in that process right now. OBS at management level has agreed to the contract. We just need to let the attorneys and the procurement areas, both sides, hammer out the minor details. So if you approve this resolution, you're giving me permission to finalize all these negotiations and approve the final contract. Because again, OBS is committed to the contract. They've committed to the statement of work and committed to the 750,000. It's just some of the details behind the scenes that we're still working on. We've done this before in the past where we do it because it'll probably be, we need to get this signed here very quickly because the contract expires here at the end of October. So we don't have time to wait for a 100% completed contract till November board meeting. So that's where we are with this. Again, we are confident that there will be no significant changes to the contract going forward in the final negotiations. If there are, I won't approve it pending another review by the board.
Okay, thanks, Sam. And this is, I think, either before or after I should have asked if there was any public comment, and I should have done that for 537 also. But I do know that Kathy would have been all over me and had reminded me, but I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any comments for 537, and if there is any for 538.
No, there's no public comment for those items.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
I didn't, oh, public comment, excuse me.
Go ahead, Kathy. Oh, do you think I was talking to that, Kathy?
No, I was confused. Yeah, sorry. It's a small world, two Kathys in a group of 10 people. That's the way it goes. I do have a couple questions about this if there's no public comment. Just in general, Stacy, overall, it doesn't concern me, but it sounds like roughly 90,000 a year on average for the past 5 years has been the expenditure. And this new contract is going to allow for, roughly the same, but the equivalent of 150,000 or so a year over a 5-year period. So that's a good margin for the kind of big project you're talking about. Stacy, if you were to quantify 150,000 a year in terms of the overall budget that is not payroll and not benefit related, so just other administrative costs, where does 150,000 a year kind of fit in? Is this a very significant part of it? Is it is it 10%, 5%? Where does it kind of fall in the big scheme?
Let me do a quick look. I mean, I can tell you that our total administrative spending is in the $2.5 million a year range, but that includes personnel, which is the largest chunk of that. I want to say that personnel is around 2 million. So it's a sizable, I could give you something precise. Let me just pull up our admin expenses, but it's a sizable chunk of our non-personnel administrative spending. It would be, our space rent is, $200,000 to $225,000 a year. In evaluation year, we spend around $100,000 on the actuaries. We spent, to give you kind of a sense, it would be one of the larger administrative expenses. And I haven't been involved in negotiating this contract, so I'd have to have Julie or Sam kind of speak to the specifics. But this is one of those things where, we pay an annual maintenance fee to OBS, and then we pay for programming as it's needed. And so it has spikes and, peaks and valleys. Like we'll do programming around the pension estimate module, and then we'll spend a lot of money on programming. And then there'll be years where we spend, like, for example, in fiscal year 2021, we spent very little on programming. So it has more of that spiky nature than a set amount that we spend every year.
Okay. So again, to clarify, the expectation is that absent any necessary programming enhancements, that the contract itself, the annual expenditures aren't going to be, this isn't a substantial increase over the normal annual expenditures. Is that correct? The maintenance services?
Julie, Chris, since I wasn't involved in this contract, what is the annual maintenance in the new contract? Julie, Chris, are you on?
I'm trying. I'm
okay,
clicking like mad to get my unmute. So Sam, do you have that figure in front of you? I can tell you that their hourly rate is not going up, which is nice. They're keeping that at the same as it has over the last 4 years.
So that would be the hourly rate for the programming.
For programming, any kind of programming or maintenance support kind of things.
We have those figures in the contract, and so I'm trying to get through this big contract. So it's in Exhibit A of the contractor. Their pricing for maintenance support is 30 to 35,000 a year, and developer 130 an hour.
Okay, and I can tell you that $35,000 a year is the current, was in the current contract as well as the annual maintenance fee. So it, you know, at baseline assumptions, it doesn't sound like we're talking about an increase in maintenance, and no increase, Julie, in the programming rate.
Correct.
Okay.
So this is really largely a margin for potential additional programming needs over that 5-year period.
That is what it sounds like to me. Julie, do you concur?
Yes, I concur.
Okay. All right. I'm comfortable.
Sam, can we
Yes.
Go ahead.
can we assume that because you've done this in the past, that there is a contingency plan that is in you guys' heads, maybe not on paper, but where you will not exceed the amount of dollars that you have set aside, if not, again, on paper, but 2%, 3%, or something of that nature each year that you have for these kind of contingencies?
The challenge we have with the technical contract, I think, is, as Stacy said, there could be one project in 1 year that itself could amount to be 50 or 75,000 bucks, and we won't know that until the issue comes up. That's why we have the contingency built in at 750 on this.
Right.
And so I'm not certain if that answers the question. It's not predictable of what we're going to see each year, because the nature of this contract is it's going to be something out of blue we haven't expected.
That's exactly what I'm saying, and that we can be assured that that is the kind of spending that has gone on in the past, and that you guys are on top of it right now in terms of future spending.
Correct.
Yeah.
We monitor the not to exceed. We actually monitor the expenditures all the time. I mean, we're very diligent in making sure that we are frugal with what we spend. We're not asking for any features or stuff to the system that aren't needed to do business. So again, we're extremely good at managing our funds here, and we only will ask for services that are needed to keep the business operational or to provide some new services there. So we aren't going to be using this for creating anything out of the ordinary or anything fancy that we don't need.
I, as Catherine, am satisfied with that.
Hey, Sam, quick question. So just for my own understanding, the system that's going to be, maintained by OBS, is that our system? Is that the city's system, or is that a system or software provided by OBS?
We own it. It's proprietary to FPDR. So the city doesn't really own the application. So the database, I always think it's funny because it's an application that sits on top of the database. So there's two components to it, but we just call it database. So it is ours. We built it with OBS's help. They did the programming and stuff, but it is our money, it's ours. We own it. We own all the code, etc.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Good discussion. I hope everybody got their questions answered. I would entertain a motion for resolution 538.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Sounds like it was second by two. We'll take James on that one. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion on resolution 538? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor of resolution 538 as presented, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sam. And this moves us to resolution 539. And I assume we have sign up for speaking on this, and I don't know what order you want that, Sam, if you want people to speak first, or do you want to give your explanation?
Typically what we do is I give our explanation, answering your questions, and then you can bring in the speakers and we'll go through the process.
Is that correct, Kathy, that we have speakers on this, or?
We do. We have Attorney Nelson Hall waiting to speak on this matter.
Okay. So go ahead, Sam, you have the floor.
Okay. So we are looking to amend an administrative rule that was created in March 18th of 2020 in response to the pandemic. At that time, so I'm going to give you the whole history of the rule because many of you weren't here when this went through, because this is a very unique rule to FPDR. It targets a very specific situation, and that's the COVID-19 issues. So we wrote this back in March of 2020 to assure that our firefighters and police officers receive the extra consideration of their COVID-related claims because their work placed them at a greater risk of exposure or contracting the coronavirus, greater risk than the general public with that. Interesting, with this rule, Portland police officers and firefighters through this rule are the only police officers and firefighters in the state of Oregon who receive any special consideration for a COVID-related claim or a COVID-related work injury. The state legislature tried both in 2020 and 2021 to pass bills that would have extended somewhat benefits or that were similar to this rule to all firefighters and police officers, but additional workers throughout the state, but both times the bills failed. So again, therefore, our firefighters and police officers are the only one to have this special consideration due to COVID. As I said before, the rule became effective in March 2020. We implemented the rule without board approval, which is out of the ordinary, but we did have the board approve it in May 28, and they did make some amendments to it. So, this time we came in, created a part 5704, which is our under our claim approval. It's the COVID-19 claims C. It's the area, if you have your board packet open, it's in red. That's what we're adding to this time. This has to do with the city of Portland. It has to do with vaccination issues. We created this to support the city of Portland's vaccination policy dated August 30, 2021. The city's policy requires that all city employees except sworn police officers to either receive a vaccine or an approved exemption by October 18, 2021, and failure to obtain either will result in separation of employment from the city. So we thought we added this rule to support this effort and to encourage firefighters and police officers to get the vaccination. We wrote the rule to alleviate some of our members' concerns about adverse vaccine reactions and remove some barriers to obtaining a vaccine. We want to make them feel more comfortable to get the vaccine, and any more comfortable we can make them to feel about getting a vaccine, the more likely they're going to get that vaccine. So what difference does this rule make from what we had before? Okay, this rule is not adding a new benefit. Members have always had the opportunity to file a disability claim for an adverse vaccine reaction. We've received several claims since the vaccines became available. The first claim received for a vaccine reaction was in January 2021, probably about a month or two after the vaccines became available, and the claim was approved. So this benefit we're doing, again, we've already paid some of the vaccine claims. What this does is it changes the burden of proof for the claim. We add a presumption into it. Typically what happens is when a member files a claim with a disability claim with FPDR or files a workers' compensation claim with the state, which our members can't, but the standard is that the member's responsibility is to prove or provide documentation that the condition they're claiming is work-related. Presumption flips that over to the point to where now it's assumed that it's work-related or presumed it's work-related. And if FPDR disagrees with that, FPDR absorbs the burden of proving that it was not work-related. So again, it moves it from where the member has to prove or document that it's work-related, flips the presumption to where FPDR has to show that it is not work-related. And also want to note that this rule became effective September 9th. That's when we first published it. We did on around September 22nd, published a change to the rule, but it still wasn't substantive in the sense that it prevented people from filing a claim. So that's what we have right now on it. So do you have some questions on this? I imagine there's going to be quite a few questions. So once you start firing them away.
Sam, as I was reading some of the rules last night regarding the standards that are already in place, the major decision that question that I had is the determination between approve versus disapprove. And I feel comfortable now after hearing you say that you guys do take that in consideration. And if a person has followed all the rules for approval, then that's when approval sets in place. Or if they have not, meaning that there's some other kind of sickness they had before then, that is the distinction in terms of whether they are approved for support, financial support or not.
Kim, I'm going to defer that to you to go ahead and discuss with that. Got to get you off mute. There you go.
Yeah, my apologies because I could not hear. I just turned my volume up all the way. And so I apologize, Chair Carter, with the question. Can someone summarize quickly? I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, my question was that, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm trying. Thank you.
Okay, let me know when you can, because I don't mind going back.
Okay, thank you.
But my question was the distinction between approve versus disapprove. Mm-hmm. So if the person had an underlying illness that caused the reaction to the shots, anything of that nature, we do have in place measures that says you are approved because you've done all the things that is necessary to have this shot and got the reaction. And that's the difference between approved versus disapproved.
Well, yeah, let me just explain that. Thank you for wanting an explanation on that distinction. So when we evaluate the claim, we do look to make sure that there is a connection between the vaccine reaction that the member has suffered and their work. And that review involves looking at whether or not there are other things that could have caused that reaction. If after review and the member has completed their application and done all that they need to do, and we find that reaction is indeed from the vaccination that they received, we're going to approve that claim. And if not, we will issue a denial or disapproval, as you've said. Does that help?
Yes.
Kim, if I could follow up with what you said in relation to Chairman Carter's question. So the proposed rule, does include, a term significant factor in causing the need for medical treatment, right? So, and that is a capitalized term. I'm assuming that's a defined term. Where is that exactly defined in relation to, how you would determine whether that was in fact a significant factor?
So significant factor is a term that is is a combination legal and medical. Significant factor is a term that we use to analyze and define the cause of an injury or illness and its relationship to work. It is defined in 5.6 of our administrative rules. And again, it is one that is kind of the measure of whether or not an injury or illness is work related. It is both legal and medical, and I think Franco could dive in and help me out if he wanted to. But basically, it's a term of art, and it is a standard that we use in our assessment of whether or not a claim is work related.
Great, and thank you. I just want to make sure that it is in fact clearly defined elsewhere and it's for public consumption. And if the board will indulge me for one more question, what was the rationale between the two different standards for the burden of proof? Because I note, and I'm sure that was also noted by the fire department as well as the police association, that the standard for the vaccine was preponderance of evidence, whereas the standard used elsewhere was clear and convincing. So I'm just curious, and for mission to record, as to the rationale or the intent behind having two separate standards.
Sure. If I can start, and I would just ask Sam to chime in whatever he would like. When the COVID rules were introduced, this was new to everybody, right? The pandemic, the illnesses, exposures was new to everybody. And one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that our members had security and coverage under our rules in case they experienced an exposure or illness as a result of the coronavirus. So the clear and convincing evidence just said that if they file a claim, FPDR has to prove it just assumes it's work related. And what FPDR has to do is prove by clear and convincing evidence that that illness or exposure was not service connected, not related to their work. So the difference between the rules implemented at the onset of the COVID pandemic and all that was unknown was more of an assurance for our members that there was going to be coverage. Fast forward now over a year later, and we're talking about vaccine reaction claims. And the reality is that when vaccine reactions started, we already evaluated them under our existing rules. But when the mandate, and we approved them, as Sam said, we approved them under our existing rules. There was enough of a connection between the vaccine and the member's work to approve that claim. When the city introduced the vaccine mandate and the incentives there to get members to vaccinate, we realized that not all members would get vaccinated at the station, for example, or at the precinct, which had been offered to our members throughout the process of vaccinating people interested in receiving them. So what we realized is that someone may get a vaccination at Safeway, for example, or at somewhere else at another hospital or clinic. And typically when we're evaluating a work injury, there has to be this nexus between the injury or illness and their work. And by mandating this vaccination and the fact that members, the nexus between work and the vaccination would be removed if they had it in another environment, the benefit of a preponderance of evidence is just that we are going to consider those other factors as part of their work. So it just offered a little more an expansion, if you will, of consideration for the vaccination, and something that would help out in situations that were quite normal, what we would typically see and what we had seen when members were initially being vaccinated on the job site.
Thank you.
If I could, this is Franco Luchin, City Attorney's Office. Is part of the question, Trustee Huang, is it why preponderance versus clear and convincing evidence as the standard?
No, I know the difference between the two standards. What I was trying to understand was the drafter's rationale for having two different standards, and I wanted to make the record reflect the intent of the drafter.
Yes, and so the original version of the COVID rule that was presented to the board, and I can't remember, it's been a while, but Sam mentioned it. The original version of the rule that's up for amendment now to include the vaccine did have preponderance of the evidence as the standard to rebut. That's the standard that's the only standard that the Portland voters have ever included in the FPDR plan, in the city charter. Any other clear and convincing has only come from the legislature preempting Portland voters and changing the plan through statutory changes to Chapter 656, the workers' compensation law. And the police trustee at the time that the rule was presented was Trustee Hunziker at the time. He proposed an amendment to the rule to change the proposed preponderance standard to clear and convincing evidence against the advice of the city attorney's office, and with the rationale that so much was unknown about COVID that a clear and convincing standard would be better. And the public advice was, well, a preponderance standard is much closer to 50-50. So if that's the reason, then logic would dictate that preponderance makes more sense than clear and convincing, which we know means highly probable, right? Nonetheless, clear and convincing is what was adopted. And so now the ask that this rule be made consistent with the existing rule is an ask that this rule be made consistent with a change that the police trustee had proposed, not that FPDR had initially proposed.
Thank you.
Just one additional question on that, Sam, is that I love to have these lawyers on board talking about preponderance of evidence and clear and convincing and giving us the distinction between. But has there been a time in history, in recent history, that the legislature has overruled the city charter?
Yes, they did it a few years ago with the post-traumatic stress syndrome condition. They overruled the charter and they prescribed how those claims were to be managed and extended that to FPDR. And they did use a clear and convincing at that time. This last legislative session, they did what we call the heart-lung presumption. It expanded, gave a whole series of diagnoses that were being treated under a presumption of clear and convincing. And the way it was written, it superseded the charter and we had to implement it. We have amended the charter to show that now. But yes, the legislature has. The legislature was looking to try to do COVID rules that were very similar to ours, but they were going to be written in such a way that they would have overruled ours, even if I think they were lesser of a benefit than what our rules was. So yes, the legislature has the authority and power to override us, and they have done it recently, both in the PTSD conditions as well as the heart-lung conditions.
Okay, so we're going to assume as a result of the past board for the May board meeting that they accepted this motion, that we can feel pretty convinced that this is a measure that we can support today.
You have the option today to substitute the wording of clear and convincing in for preponderance of evidence if you want. That's one of the things that I think that both the unions had asked for in their letters that I had forwarded to you. Okay. So that is always your opportunity to look through as you go through today, if you want to make an amendment to our recommended wording. Excuse me?
I was asking James, what was his thoughts?
No, given the intent of the drafter and also the intent of this rule, I'm sufficiently satisfied with that preponderance of evidence standard.
Okay. Thank you, Ms.
And I want to weigh in here as well. I think it was helpful to get the background that clear and convincing is more the exception than the standard wording for this type of thing. Secondly, I think that the situation as to whether or not an illness or a virus is contracted at work versus not at work is a very difficult thing. And so clear and convincing for that protocol seems reasonable. But a vaccine, you've had it or you haven't had it. So there's no question about whether you've had it or haven't had it. You're going to say whether you have. And so this is more, does a majority of the evidence versus, support the logic that it's vaccine-related treatment being required subsequently or not. It feels to me like preponderance in this instance is the appropriate wording, in my opinion.
I'll weigh in here. So I think that Mr. Hall is going to speak on this, and we can, he's going to have some, I think, opinions on how we might amend this, so we can wait and see what he has to say too, or somebody could make an amendment if they want. And I'll go back to Mr. Luchen's comments about the proposed amendment made by the police trustee at the time. And I will also say, if I remember correctly, it was voted on and unanimously approved, and a lot of good discussion. And the opinion was that that was the standard that the board agreed on and wanted to put forward, and it was voted and passed. And I would like it to stay that way within this section. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know how one would work different than the other, but I think clear and convincing is a very appropriate standard, just like it is for the part about getting COVID-19. It's just a higher standard. I understand that. And I don't think that's wrong. I mean, our job here as a board is to protect our members. And if it's a stronger standard that makes the fund work a little bit harder, or to prove it a little bit with some more evidence, and I don't see anything wrong with that at all. It might create some more work, and I understand I don't want to put work on people, but I think it's important that we as the board, we protect our members as much as we can. And then I'd also like to talk when Mr. Luchen said that against the advice of the board. I don't remember that at all. I mean, I don't know if it was against the advice of Mr. Luchen or Sam. I don't remember that part. Could you kind of enlighten me again on that, Franco? I don't remember that part.
Thank you, acting chair Lehman. My point was what was articulated by then Trustee Hunsaker as a reason for changing what was proposed from preponderance, which again, if you look at the charter, is the only standard that's ever applied to FPDR by the Portland voters, to clear and convincing evidence was, we don't know enough about COVID-19 right now. To which the analysis that I had then, and I would offer now, is if that's the case, then a preponderance of the evidence makes more sense as the standard, because it's closer to 50-50. It's essentially which side, and I appreciate you, Trustee Lehman, mentioning evidence, because that's really all we're talking about here is allocation of the burden of proof and which way the evidence, the expert medical evidence, is going to tip on this issue. And my point then, and I still think it's accurate, is if something is unknown, then a standard that is closer to something that's 50-50 makes tremendously more sense than one that calls for high probability, which is what clear and convincing evidence is.
Yeah, and I don't know if I understand completely, but like you're saying, you think we know more about COVID now than we did then? Is that kind of what you were getting at?
No, I was addressing the then police trustees' reason for wanting to change the standard into a higher standard. As I recall, it wasn't about protecting anyone. It was about we don't know enough about COVID. And to which I said, well, in that case, just as a matter of logic, preponderance would be the better standard, consistent with the charter. That's my only point. And I'm not an expert on what's known about the vaccination causing, and really what we're talking about here is the vaccination causing disability or the need for medical treatment, right? Those are the benefits available under this disability plan.
And like we were talking before, so we didn't know a lot about COVID. We know a little bit more now. We didn't know, it's almost the same time frame. And then, 12 months later, you're giving a vaccine, and now we're within 10 months of when the vaccine came out. So it's like we're almost on the same time schedule as when COVID appeared, and then we made a rule, and now we're making a rule on the vaccine that we still don't know a lot about. So like I said, I think that it's a clear and convincing would fit right in here. It's my opinion. And I think that Nelson Hall is going to talk about that. And so, and then we can all talk again after he speaks. And then if anybody else on the board has any more to say before we bring up the public comment, now would be a good time.
I Trustee Lehman, I do agree with you that I think in order for this board to make an informed decision as to the language in the proposed amendment, it's important for us to take into consideration, opinions from all sides, right? Because at the end of the day, I think you're right that we do want to protect our members. At the same time, we also have to think about the administration interest of our public as well. So in order for us to make that decision, I think that I think it's appropriate to hear comments from all sides.
I agree, James. And I think part of that got cut out. Could you repeat the last half of what you said? I don't want to act like I know what you said.
No, basically what I said was that, yes, I agree with you that in order for us to really make an informed decision as to how this amendment should be voted on or revised, let's hear from all sides, the spectrum, and then we can have further discussions and then eventually vote on the amended language.
Thank you very much.
Chris Colpier. I'd like to support Mr. Lehman on his idea on this as well. I feel like this is a financial decision. Is that what we're looking at here, Sam? Do we have any data on what either one of these terms would do financially to the fund?
There is no data on this. To be honest with you, we think we're going to get very few. We've only had about 7 claims submitted, and only about 3 of them were taken all the way through because the members sort of dropped their claims because we do require them to seek medical attention. So the claims, and we're looking for a shorter period of time for this. I don't think we're going to see that many claims, so it's going to be hard to even quantify the total number of claims. And are we going to have any idea how many claims are going to be denied due to the difference in the presumption? No. I think as Kim indicated that if this is a fairly more binary thing, it's going to be more on what we feel caused the reaction. Was it really the vaccine that caused the reaction, or was it not? And was that cause work-related or not? And this presumption takes away the issue of where you got the vaccine or why you got the vaccine. It allows us to focus on what the condition is and did the condition caused by the vaccine. So I'll be honest with you, I don't think we're going to see very many claims that are going to come under this. And if we have it, I think I don't even know if I would say there's going to be any difference in the number of denied claims between preponderance and clear and convincing. Not to say there wouldn't be, but it's, again, the numbers are so small and these claims tend to be very short duration. Most of these people miss 3 to 4 days worth of work, maybe get a doctor checkup or 2. So they're very low cost. So financially, it's low. And is there going to be any financial impact? The only risk that you have is somebody has a catastrophic reaction to the vaccine that is permanently disabling. But that's so rare. I've heard very few of those in the country. So again, I think we don't know how many claims we're going to have. I think they're going to be short. How many of them are going to be denied simply because of the difference in the presumption, I think is going to be almost nil, to really be honest with you. And the expenses of these claims is very low.
Without there being a financial negative impact on this, I think it's beneficial to get more of our guys vaccinated if it's harder for FPDR to deny their claim. I think it just kind of bolsters the mayor's recommendation to get more of our guys vaccinated. I would like to see the clear and convincing language put in there. Second to that, did you have any input on the changing of required or recommended in the first part of that rewrite? Were there any concerns with that? Referring back to the FPDR, the PPA guys, they're being recommended, they're not being required.
So that language.
This wording, I hate to say, that is the wrong wording. Darn. I just looked at it. Let me pull something up and I'll try to flap it because we took a sentence out of this.
Yeah.
And this is an older version that's got that sentence in it. Shoot. Sorry, I just noticed that.
And Sam, you can make sure we all have the proper one too, because I definitely don't want to vote on something that's not current. So I don't know if you're going to need to email it to us.
I can bring it up here in a minute if I can find where it is.
Yeah, because the version that was eventually circulated, I thought that language about required or recommended was stricken out.
It was.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to find. Just give me a second.
And while Sam is doing that, if I could ask him, I don't want to surprise you later on, but if you could kind of think about, whether the requirement for a significant factor, is going to somehow affect your burden of proof in proving whether to deny or approve the claim, right? Because certainly preponderance of evidence is a lesser standard that the board has to meet in order to pay that out. But you also have to take into consideration that the vaccine was not a significant factor in causing a need for medical treatment. And that requirement is absent from paragraphs A or B. It's just that you have to show a clear and convincing evidence indicating that, that the diagnosis was service connected, right? So again, while the burden of proof is a higher burden, but you don't have to meet any other requirements to approve or deny a claim, whereas you do under Section C. So if you could kind of think about whether that term significant factor is somehow going to, lead to the effect or the same effect of having almost like a clear and convincing, evidence standard in order for you to adjudicate that claim, I would be interested in your take on that.
Okay, thank you. And let me put it this way. The significance factor standard is a standard that FPDR has used, I think, since 2006 or 7. It is a standard that is used for any illness or injury that a member sustains on the job. And what we're looking at, that is a kind of legal and medical standard that we apply to the evidence surrounding the claim. And the evidence surrounding the claim being, when were they hurt? Were they hurt on the job? What were they doing at the time they were injured? And was that injury, did it arise out of and in the course and scope of their employment? Once we've crossed that threshold and we've done that analysis of their claim, then we look to see if the resultant condition was caused by that event. And what we do is we gather that information and we pose that to our doctors. It is a question that a doctor will answer. Did that herniated disc result from that lifting incident on January 1st? And if the doctor says, considering all information, that yes, the work was a significant factor in the cause of disability and need for treatment, then we're going to approve that claim. So the significant factor being applied to vaccine reactions, and as we will see when we go through our slide, the majority of FPDR claims are approved using this standard, even though it is a member's burden of proof. The majority of our claims, and there are a great majority of them are approved, very few are denied, is with use of the significant factor standard. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sam, did you
Yeah,
I see it in an email that you sent out to us. I don't know the revised attachment, but I see it in the email that you sent to us.
I'm going to share my screen here with you just a second. It may take me a while to get all this stuff.
Loretta Smith.
Okay, so here, this is what's posted on our website, and I'm going to send you the link to this document. As you can see from here, it says for active members who take a COVID vaccine incur. So we deleted that wording required, completely was required. It was deleted out of it. I'm sorry we didn't get this as the version that should have been included with your with your board book. I'll send you the link. And when you go forward, this should be the version to which you talk about and amend with that. So I'll send you the link to that. So it removes that incurred wording that we had in there. Does anybody have any questions on this? So we're not linking this even though it's our intent when we wrote this is to tie it into the city vaccine policy, we're deleting all reference to the vaccine policy out of the rule because police weren't required to be under the vaccine. And with that, this rule excluded police. And so right now we wanted to say, if you take a COVID vaccine, incur an adverse reaction and file a complete application, we'll treat the need for medical treatment and time loss at work as being work-related.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to take this down because it will block your screens, but I'll bring it back up if you need to look at it. But this is the version you should be working from. It still has the preponderance of evidence question that you had in there. All we did is take out that phrase required to get a COVID vaccine. So we took that out of it. I apologize again for having the other one in there.
I have a follow-up question for Trustee Cole. Despite the fact that I'd like to hear other comments, but I'm still leaning toward preponderance myself as an appropriate standard for this particular situation. But Trustee Cole, you alluded to the fact that having stronger wording, if it wasn't going to make a huge differential in terms of the number of claims or the approval of claims, that simply having the higher standard may in itself be more motivating for someone reluctant to get a vaccine to get it because they feel more protected, that if something happened, the chances the claim would be approved if something happened. Is that what you were?
Yes, and I view this fund as a benefit to my members, right? So, and I've got a number of guys that are on the fence about getting the vaccine. So any hurdle I can remove from them going forth and getting the vaccine, I like to promote. And if it's not going to negatively affect the fund financially, and I would just like it harder. I always view it as I like it harder for the fund to deny than for the member to try to submit added documentation for it to be accepted. I just want it to be easier on the member rather than the fund, if that makes sense. And any hurdle I can remove is what I'm trying to do.
Okay, I can appreciate that. There is the flip side where there being a reasonable cause for providing a benefit that does exist. So there are different perspectives on that, and I can certainly see your perspective. But unique case where there seems to be quite a lot of reticence. Do you feel that this wording change alone could make a material difference for someone deciding or not deciding to get a vaccine?
There's definitely the potential. It's probably a case-by-case basis for me. I know of some folks that would be an issue for them with the mass amounts of information that's out there in the world, and people trying to figure out what's true and what's not true anymore. And I know there's a real fear of taking this vaccine because of the side effects and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Lehman, do you have any thoughts about that from your side?
I agree with Trustee Culp. I don't know everybody's opinion. I think anything we can do to alleviate people's fear and move forward. And I can't help but think that part of this is as far as keeping the preponderance is the fear that we're going to get this language in the charter somewhere because the citizens have never approved this before. It's like, well, I don't know where that goes, but I think we should remove that fear also. And it's already in here in this section. And if it's going to help, why not put it in? I just don't understand what it's going to hurt other than possibly somebody's feared that this is going to be the standard through the charter. But I think the flip side of that is the citizens would have to vote to change the charter. So I think anything would help. I don't see the downside.
Thanks.
it just appears to me that when we talk about preponderance of evidence versus clear and convincing, that preponderance of evidence creates a higher standard than clear and convincing because we don't know that much about the disease. And since doctors don't know that much about the disease, it would appear to me that preponderance of evidence would be a higher standard than clear and convincing, because that's a higher approval, it appears to me, unless I'm not getting the message, that it appears to me that preponderance of evidence would be better for members than clear and convincing. And I stand open for further conversation from you guys if you think that I'm wrong on that.
If I may, Chair Carter, the way that the courts have defined, and I agree, it is a little bit, when you see the terms, it's not completely clear on its face, but the courts have defined clear and convincing evidence as highly probable, whereas preponderance is more likely than not. So really the clear and convincing standard is the higher burden of proof. And I also just want to add while I'm at it, I'm not, my advice is not policy advice, which hopefully, and there is no chance that an administrative rule is going to change the charter, Trustee Lehman. You're right, it would have to go to the voters. So that's not, there's no fear that's, that this advice is rooted in. It's just legal advice. So, and again, you know, the board didn't take it the last time around. So it's just my job to give it.
Attorney Lucian.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Carter.
No, I was going to say I'm comfortable going with Trustees Lemon and Culp on this, but it seems like a harder drive for the members under clear and convincing than it is for preponderance of evidence. But I will take your word on this and vote to support your motion. But I just think for the sake of clarification, it would seem to me, it appears to me that preponderance of evidence is would be more favorable for the membership than clear and convincing.
Yeah, in my perception, that burden of proof is a higher standard for the fund itself, not for the officer. The clear and convincing is a benefit to the employee, to the member. That's where I kind of come into this. Anything that makes it easier on the member and puts a little more onus on the fund is where I fall, I think.
Trustee Culp, thank you for clarifying, because initially I had the same read as, if I may assume, Chairman Carter's read of that standard, because I thought that was the standard that the members would have to prove. And that's why I question, why are you guys pushing for a consistent higher standard on the burden of proof? But it's actually the flip side where, it's the fund that would have to prove by those standards as to whether to approve or deny. Right. So that's why, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
But for Attorney Lucian, though, I just want to make sure I understand. So if we were to go with these two different standards, given what you said about the voter needing to approve the change to the charter, right?
Sorry, I was just responding to Trustee Lehman. I was just saying the advice is not, I think he characterized it as maybe there'd be some sort of concern about this leading to some different charter standard maybe down the line. And that's not it. And I guess what I would say is the charter, where it imposes a burden of proof on FPDR, it's always preponderance, and it just so happens, the voters are the ones who adopt that charter. So that's the point I was making. The board is not constrained by that, but if we're taking sort of an analytical approach to which one to choose, I just think for transparency that needs to be out there. The board makes whatever policy decision it wants to within within the legal options, which both of the standards we're talking about are legal options. So
thank you for clarifying, because I was concerned that if we were to adopt clear and convincing evidence in this case that the amendment may subject to legal challenges. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, when you are ready, I'm prepared to vote on clear and convincing.
Okay, now, I know we still have a speaker who's going to speak on this before we make a motion, just so we get the perspective of everyone. And then I also like to, I apologize. As the chair, I probably should have recognized everybody's, time on the board, and probably shouldn't have jumped into this too quick and talked about what we're doing here. Is this is an administrative rules, what we're working on, and which is governed by the charter, and we're not going to change the charter. We can't change the charter. We can only change the rules underneath the charter. And I think there's pretty what you would say, some rules on what we can and can't change. And I think Mr. Luchin would step in if we were trying to amend anything that would somehow change the charter. So what we're working on today is just an administrative rule. So if there's no more from the board, I would open it up to the speakers. Kathy?
Attorney Nelson Hall is waiting to speak.
Mr. Hall, you have the floor. And an introduction would be good too, please.
Yes, can people hear me, first of all?
I can.
All right. Am I appearing by video as well? I'm trying to make sure that I make use of the technology here.
Unless you are an emoji, you are not appearing.
Kathy, can you hear me? I did try, I signed in to appear both video and audio. Am I going to appear video, Kathy?
We can hear you, but we can't see your video.
Well, I suppose that's, that may be a good thing. All right. Again, I do not want to waste the board's time trying to appear by video as well as audio if my testimony will be as effective by audio only. But again, Kathy, I defer to you in terms of the technology. Okay. All right, well, let me proceed. If everyone can hear me, I will just go with audio. And though assure you that I have a suit and tie on today to properly appear before the Board of Trustees. As always, members of the board, thank you for granting me the opportunity to appear before you and to offer comments, often referred to as testimony, but it's not sworn. So I will refer to my thoughts and my input for your consideration to be just that. If you would please indulge me for 1 minute in terms of introductions. I appreciated hearing about each of you. This is such a new board, that is to say, Member Lehman and Member McLeod are the only two that have witnessed me or seen me appear before the board. And those are the only two, other than Mr. Culp as a PPA member, who know me. Chair Carter, I don't know that you and I ever shook hands, but I can tell you I've had the privilege of working with the State Council, the Oregon Council of Firefighters, for a couple decades at least, if not longer, and with the Portland Police Association in our efforts in the state legislature, specifically around 3 different presumptions for our first responders, our fire, police, and first responders. And Chair Carter, my involvement in the legislature had to do with the cancer presumption for state firefighters, for all firefighters in the state of Oregon. My participation was involving all fire, police, first responders in getting the presumption in the state statute passed for post-traumatic stress disorder. And most recently in our effort to have the state presumption for heart and lung diseases, which has actually been on the state statute since the early 60s, to have that most recently, as Mr. Hutchison said, applied to the Portland Charter as well. So those are three very specific examples of presumptions that are now part of the charter, part of the FPDR disability. Real quick, also forgive me in terms of introduction. I have been involved with FPDR for approximately 23 years. And that include being intimately involved, essentially involved in the charter changes, which are now seem like 100 years ago, but where we went from the Board of Trustees making decisions on cases to the administrative law judge contested case hearing process that we have, and all that went into changing the charter to the system that we have today. I offer that only to reassure those members that do not know me from experience to know that I have been involved in FPDR matters on behalf of Portland Fire and Portland Police now for some 23 years. And in fact, I am, as far as I know, the only attorney representing Portland Fire and Portland Police in the contested case hearings arising out of the fire and police disability retirement system. That is to say, I've had the privilege in more recent years of being the only attorney working with and opposing Mr. Luchin. And I will tell you as a light-sided comment, Mr. Luchin did not have gray hair when he and I started working together. I had neither hair nor was what I had, it was all gray. So that's just a little bit of introduction, folks, in terms of why I have been asked on behalf of the Portland Police Association and Local 43 Portland Fire to appear in front of you today. I hope that my bona fides, my credentials will add some weight to what I'm about to tell you. Next, I want to thank the fund. I want to thank Mr. Hutchison and all of his staff for addressing this issue of the adverse effects, the adverse reactions to the vaccines. It is, even if the numbers are few, and I would accept Mr. Hutchison's kind of statistical analysis there of how many of these claims there are or may be impacted. Here's my point. I want to thank you for addressing this because in the end, we do not know any more about the adverse reactions to the vaccines than we probably did, as somebody commented, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when it came to the virus itself. And I'm going to come back to that very point in a minute when it comes to the burden of proof. But my point is, thank you for addressing this, and because I think it's critical, just as accepting a presumption for the underlying COVID virus itself was critical. Now, I want to then move. There were 3 points, members of the board, that PPA and Portland Fire initially responded to, and that was in Sam's the initial proposed amendment. And thank you again, staff, Mr. Hutchison, for addressing the first concern we had, and that was that this presumption should only apply, that this rule should only apply to where the vaccine was required. And so we commented on that. We proposed that that be modified. So again, thank you for taking that requirement, that it be a required or even recommended vaccine, taking that out of this proposed rule. Now, the second issue that we had that both PPA and Local 43 Portland Fire addressed in their comments has to do with, excuse me, this notion of burden of proof, clear and convincing, and so on. And I will have to tell you, because you could not see me, I'm sitting in my office, and for the last hour or so, or the discussion of this amendment, I would have appeared to you as being that antsy school child jumping around in my chair, raising my hand, saying, "Please call on me," so that I could address the concerns, the questions that you all have raised. I will tell you that I made some quick notes, so hopefully I can now address the concerns. Let me start with this notion of clear and convincing versus preponderance, and why, and specifically want to address Chair Carter and Member Wong, what you raised, because what this amendment does, like its companion, that is the amendment that was passed last spring, it is basically, by administrative rule, creating a preliminary presumption. That is to say that it grants the benefit of the burden of proof to the member. As somebody, I think Mr. Hutchison indicated early on, what this does is shift the burden of proof and the burden of persuasiveness as to the evidence. It moves that to the fund, and it places the burden on the fund to do what? To disprove that significant factor. And to the extent that there were questions about the significant factor, my clients, PPA and Local 43, do not have concerns about maintaining significant factor as the necessary degree of contribution. That is to say that COVID was a significant factor in X, or that the vaccine was a significant factor in X. We accept that connection, and that's what significant factor is. It is the degree of contribution to X. Where we disagree, and where I am adamantly, on behalf of my clients, adamantly, and by the way, I am appearing today at the request of PPA and Local 43 Fire, where we're adamant about the need for the clear and convincing is this. Because so much is unknown, for the very same reasons that it was unanimously adopted by the Board of Trustees for the initial COVID burden of proof, because it's so complicated, because there's so much unknown, and because, quite frankly, the medical experts, the medical community, when asked, would be scratching their head and saying, you know, we don't know if it was this or that. So to relieve the member of that horrendous burden of then doing what? Of proving in the first instance by a preponderance or by some other degree that they had the burden to prove X was too onerous. It just, hence the wisdom of the Board of Trustees, again, unanimously adopting clear and convincing, so that the burden is on the fund, not the member, but is on the fund to, in essence, overcome or to disprove that, disprove what? That significant contribution, that significant factor. So now we come along, and it turns out, we know from experience, unfortunately, that the vaccines themselves, not often, but can produce adverse reactions. Adverse enough that the member loses a shift or two, or loses some time from work, incurs some medical expenses for those adverse reactions. So again, I thank the trustees, I thank the staff for addressing this additional concern, and that is the adverse reactions. Point being then, if clear and convincing was appropriate for the initial presumption on the virus itself, then for all the complicated reasons, for all the burdens that would otherwise be put on the member to try to prove these adverse reactions, where this was a significant factor, for all those same reasons, then the burden for this additional benefit, so I'm going to change that, because Sam is right. It's not granting additional benefits, but for addressing this additional concern, that is the adverse reactions, then the burden should be consistent within the same provision It should be clear and convincing evidence. Again, I don't want to belabor that, but for all of the reasons that the trustees unanimously adopted clear and convincing when they adopted this administrative presumption for the virus itself, those same reasons should apply in adopting clear and convincing for the adverse reactions to the vaccine. I'm going to pick up real quickly on a point. I think, Stacy, someone mentioned that, well, now, these vaccines may be received at a drugstore or your primary care clinic or so on, and not at the station house. But I also heard, I think, Sam, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think I thought I heard you say, well, where you got it really isn't a concern. Thank you, because again, the concern is the complicated nature of this area of medicine. And so again, it does not matter, should not matter, whether the member received the vaccine at a station house under the supervision of a visiting nurse, or received it at Walgreens under the supervision of a pharmacist or a nurse. So the location of where does not, I think, impact at all the nature of what you are addressing, and that is the adverse reaction to receipt of the vaccine. So so number one was the required versus recommended business. Thank you. You've addressed and taken that out. The second issue for me to address is this clear and convincing standard. You have now heard me, and I thank you for your indulgence in listening to me for all the reasons that it should be clear and convincing in this proposed amendment. I need to also now, if you would please, address one more concern. This was not in the initial comment from the Portland Police Association. We did include it, President, the PPA, or excuse me, Local 43, through its president, Alan Frischweiler, did include this in his comments on behalf of members. And that has to do with the retroactive nature or the timing, if you will, of this amendment. So apart from the substance, my concern now is the timing of this. And here's why I want to spend a few minutes addressing the timeliness of this, because early on in the discussion, one or more people addressed how what this does not change the benefits, and it does not change the actual process of these claims, the processing of these claims. Rather, it was to address this burden of proof for the adverse reactions. What's my point here? The point is that those processes, for the trustees who are not familiar with it, the processing of these claims includes that a claim must be timely filed under the current statute, excuse me, current charter in the rules. A claim must be timely filed within 30 days of X, and X is the diagnosis or date of first, time loss. Bottom line is, think of it in terms of falling and breaking an arm on the job. A member has 30 days from the date of injury to file that in the line of duty claim. So that same 30 days applies to the COVID claims and would apply to the adverse reaction claims. So again, the processing of this can be very troubling, problematic for the members because they have to meet this 30-day deadline. Now, hence a proposal, and I apologize, I did include, or at least Local 43 did include in its comment, timely submitted to you all, that this be retroactive to December of 2020. Why? Because as early as December 2020, and the vaccine was starting to come out, and guess what? First responders were being advised, they were being encouraged, they were being told, please go get this. It's for your protection, the protection of the public. So unlike those who may still be resisting this vaccine, those that we are now concerned about stepped up They did what they were asked to do, what they were recommended to do, what they were advised to do, what good common sense told them to do as first responders. They stepped up as early as December 2020 to receive these vaccines. And I appreciate, as Sam pointed out, these adverse reaction claims, apparently that came in as early as January 2021, have been approved. And it may be that technically there are no claims out there that were filed within 30 days and approved. But in case there are not, in case that the word was never properly communicated, in case there are members who in January, February, March, whatever, all the way up August, September, who suffered adverse reactions but did not know to file claims for those or did not do those for whatever complicated reasons, I urge on behalf of my clients that this amendment be applied retroactively. And here's, in the initial comment from Local 43, it was very simple, and that is, hey, make this amendment retroactive to December 2020. Well, it could be done that way, but you know what? And this is the concern. Forgive me, the light bulb went on in my head this morning in terms of, whoa, wait a minute, this amendment does not address the timeliness, this 30-day deadline business. So I fired off an email to Sam, everyone, at about 10 minutes after noon today, and which he received, and he appropriately replied to me saying, Nelson, thanks, but you know these comments were due weeks ago or days ago. So again, I apologize to all of you, but I have provided to Sam a very simple one sentence additional amendment to do what? To address this notion of timeliness. And again, whether you decide to make this retroactive to December 2020 or not, there is this now concern that I am raising about the timeliness of these claims. So in the one sentence, and I'm just going to read it, and then maybe we can figure out how Sam could provide the email to you all. But it would be my request is that we add the following sentence to sub-paragraph little c under this sub 4, all right? And that's the main paragraph that we've been discussing, that you all have been discussing. And so where it says this provision is effective August 30, 2021, pause right there, please. We could make that December, 30, whatever, December 1st, if you will, or something of 2020. More importantly is the following sentence that I would like to add, and that is applications for disability benefits under 5.7.04 sub 4 shall be deemed timely if filed within 60 days of the effective date of this provision or 30 days of an active member suffering adverse reactions, whichever date is later. I would propose or offer that kind of a provision is very common in legislative amendments and so on to address the effective date and the timeliness or the filing of matters.
Nelson, I need to cut you off here for a quick second.
Yes.
Because you have under the wording under 5704 sub 4, that should be sub 4 sub C. You left out the sub C in that because the way you've got this worded, this applies to the entire rule of all provisions of the entire rule, not just the one that we're talking about today. Is that your intent?
Thank you, Sam. Absolutely. Which, yeah, you're right. When I sent you this email, I separated it as little sub C, but you're correct. In that first sentence, you're absolutely right. Applications for disability benefits under 5.7.04 paren 4 close paren little c close paren. Yes.
Okay, I just want to hold on a minute. I did forward your email onto the board, but it probably only got in their inbox 10 minutes before the meeting. I'm going to try to share a screen here. Okay, so this is your letter that you sent me, and the wording we're talking about is down here. You can see my cursor circling it. And what I talked about is it should have a sub C here. I'm not saying I agree with this, but I want to get this corrected, what we have here. Because I do have some opinions about this. I'll let you finish, but I needed to clarify this should be 5704 sub 4 sub C. So it should be parentheses C down there. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Sam. That's absolutely correct. It should have a little sub C next to that 4. Yes.
Okay.
Members, I thank you for hearing me out. I want to just really quick, capture this. The concern that my clients raise have asked me to address with you today is the clear and convincing, and I stand ready to answer any questions you have on that. And then again, the second most concern is this effective date and the timeliness of providing or filing claims, so that in the processing of these what we anticipate to be additional or new claims for the adverse reactions, so we don't find ourselves having, Mr. Luchin and I, having to fight over, well, was this filed within 30 days of an adverse reaction? And it's like, well, guess what? The adverse reaction was last March. So of course, I mean, this provision wasn't not even in effect at that point. But so to avoid those kinds of legal fights that Mr. Luchin and I so enjoy each other's company over, I would ask that this timeliness provision be there. And again, please forgive me in terms of the new members. I'm so privileged to want to appear in front of you, Chair Carter, all of you, again, I'm going to say, Mr. Luchin and I've been at it now for several years, but I say with all great respect for all the staff and so on, I think I'm the only one at this table today that that has been involved with the FPDR Disability Fund, other than a member perhaps. I've been at this table longer than anybody else, so I offer my services. I offer, to answer any questions that any of you have. Again, thank you for hearing me out.
Okay, Jason, if you're okay, I'd like to talk about that timeliness issue and my view on that.
Absolutely, go ahead, Sam.
Doing retroactive timeliness is always hazardous because these people, first of all, they have to create a claim going clear back. If we went this way over a year and a half, they have to get doctor's information. It's very difficult to perfect such a claim. Second of all, it's just not normal to put a rule that far retroactive. And I'm going to also say is people could file claims for adverse reactions, and they have filed claims for adverse reactions. So I know that we've always had the issue with some of the members of saying, I didn't know, or I didn't think FPDR was going to prove it. Those aren't excuses for not filing a claim. They've never been good cause for missing filing a claim. There was no reason, no implication by FPDR that these claims would be denied. We've always said, as we say all the time, for any condition, you think it's work-related, file a claim. So they should have filed a claim. And then this particular rule amendment, this particular rule amendment was put in conjunction with the city's vaccine policy, where the city made this a firm requirement for firefighters and made an extra pressure on the police bureau or police officers to get this done. It's always been recommended from the beginning to get a vaccine, and there are efforts to get people vaccines, but this rule was tied to the city's vaccine, which is effective in August. It was never intended to go back to cover it all the way to the beginning. We wanted to make sure that everybody removed all the issues for meeting the city's vaccine policy and efforts to get people vaccinated. So that's why the August date was chosen. Also, this thing was, people were, the August date, we're past 30 days on the date. We do have a clause in timeliness that there's good cause for not filing on time. I think of, hey, look, this wasn't here at that time. And as soon as I learned I could file the claim, I did. But I'd argue, and that's fine, I would use that as good cause. But this rule was posted and shared with members on our website and some emails that went out on September 9th. So it's been out there for a while. The revision on about September 22nd was shared with people. So this rule's been out for a while, maybe in slightly different forms, but it's been out there. So they've been aware that, hey, look, I think I could file a claim. Plus, we go back to the mantra, you should always file a claim if you have any condition that's work-related. It's never an excuse that I didn't think I was entitled to it, or I didn't think FPDR approved it, or I wasn't sure. No, you have 30 days. People do it. We've seen it here. So I'm not big for a retro back to December. And again, this was tied to the city's COVID employee vaccine policy of August 30th. That's why I chose that date to coincide with the city's effort and demand that firefighters and strong push that police officers get vaccinated.
I'll just respond really quick. And I didn't, this language is proposed, and I don't know if it captures everything. My concern is we had, I think it was over 80%, and I don't know the numbers on the police, maybe Chris can talk about that, of our members voluntarily took the COVID vaccine last winter. And it was a brand new vaccine. People have fear now. What do you think the fear was back then? I know a lot of you probably took the vaccine too, but they stepped up. They didn't wait to get mandated. They willingly took the vaccine to protect themselves, their family, the community, to be able to come to work and do their job. And they took a risk, but they knew the risk and they took it. So I want to make sure that we aren't leaving those people behind. And I want to make sure that they're not being treated less than what the standard is today for the people who are mandated to get the vaccine. And maybe you're telling me that they aren't, but all this, I think, is trying to do is make sure that somebody isn't getting left behind and somebody doesn't have a less benefit, because they're the ones that stepped up. They're the ones that came to work and have been coming to work, not from home, for the last year and a half. The first 10 months or so without a vaccine, and then got the vaccine and continue to come to work every single day. And our members have put a lot out for this city and the citizens. And I just want to make sure, while I know you're concerned about a retro amendment, and we're talking about, I'm assuming you're talking about something else. You're not talking about a pandemic or experimental vaccine, because in my lifetime, I don't remember that ever happening. So I just want to make sure that's our concern right now, is we're protecting our members.
I understand you're protecting your members, but everybody stood up. I know a lot of people I know took the vaccine and they took it on their own. The issue comes to is how many people incurred a vaccine reaction and felt it was work-related. They should have filed a claim. And I'm sorry they don't interpret it not to, but this is an issue that we run up with quite a few other diagnoses. People self-police and try to self-decide and try to second guess what FPDR is going to do, and therefore they don't file a claim. That's not a reason to make a retro amendment to go back in and do it. I think they stepped up. They got it. If they had adverse vaccine reactions, we've had them file claims. They should have filed the claims. Denials that we haven't been tied to where they got it. Is the condition they got caused by the vaccine with it. So those are the areas, that's the biggest area we're looking at, is not reason how or why they did it. It's more of what is the medical condition they have caused by the vaccine. So that's where the biggest issue is. I'm trying to figure out, do you think there's a huge pent up demand of 10, 15, 20 firefighters, police officers who got vaccines, missed a week of work and didn't file a claim because they thought FPDR wasn't going to do it? What's the problem? I know we want to cover people. I think this rule covers people going forward. It provides it. I just don't know what's the problem, why we have to go back a year and a half on this. Do you know for a fact that people had adverse reactions and didn't file a claim, or were told they shouldn't file a claim? Because I know the people who filed claims, we looked at them, and again, the issues dealt more with what caused the medical condition rather than the circumstances around getting the vaccine. So I just, retro amendments are always squishy because the thing I pop back with Nelson is we haven't had enough time to look at all the pros and cons of a retro amendment. I'm worried about, or somebody said, oh, I missed 5 days worth of work back in March. Did you see a doctor? No. Well, then are you going to give people false hope that we're going to pay the claim now? Because they have certain steps they have to go through to get a claim filed. And can they do that 5, 6, 8 months, 10 months later after they had an adverse reaction and missed some time at work? So are we creating this false sense of security because their doctor may not sign off on anything? There may not be proof, or maybe they never even saw the doctor, because when they have to see the doctor to get a claim approved here, we need medical certification that there's a condition that prevents them from working. So retros are sort of full. I understand the concept. I think this rule really forwards and looks out for your members, saying, hey, look, this is what the city's demanding that people do. And we're covering for people and trying to remove that angst. People who didn't take advantage of filing it in the past, I'm not certain what we're trying to accomplish, what the issues, how many people are affected. Are we creating something more complex that actually could lead to more claim denial simply because people can't meet the burden of proof that's required anytime a claim is filed, whether or not it's a clear and convincing preponderance or a normal one. So I have some serious issues with going retro a year and a half back.
Okay, so I think we're just talking about the vaccine, right? So let me ask you, do you know of anybody that put in a claim for time loss because of an adverse reaction to the vaccine, and were they approved, or would you have paid a time loss?
We have paid time loss and have paid for medical for people.
With a vaccine reaction?
Yes.
Okay.
We've received several claims for vaccine reactions and we've paid some. Again, the issue that becomes where it challenges the claim is the medical condition really a result of the vaccine, or is the medical condition result of another issue outside of the vaccine? That seems to be with the issue that we're debating about on some of these claims, not whether getting the claim is necessarily work related or getting the vaccine was prompted by work.
Yeah, I don't have any evidence. I'm not talking about specific claims. I don't have a backlog of people. We're just thinking about, making sure we're not missing anybody. And I'll tell you what they did at the Fire Bureau. They waited till about 5 or 6 in the morning on the day we were going off, and they came to the station and they vaccinated us as we were going home. And I don't think it was by accident, because then we all went home and got sick for 2 days. And then we had to come back the third day, so they didn't have to pay sick leave. And it's probably a smart financial move, but all of our members, the ones that didn't feel well after the vaccine, got their 2 days off. They were sick, and I'm fine with that. I was able to come back on my third day, but there's some people that didn't make it back their third day. They were still sick. And I want to make sure those people were captured. And if you're telling me that it was known to the members that they could have done it then I'm a little better about this, but I had no idea that was something that somebody could have filed a claim for. It just didn't sound like something to me at the time.
Well, this gets into with it. Do you think, because the ones who filed the claims were the ones that say, hey, I got this claim because I'm a firefighter. I got this vaccine because I'm a firefighter. Therefore, I think it's work-related. I'm filing the claim. So people did it. There was nothing published on the contrary saying it's not covered. Don't file it. We aren't going to cover vaccines. And that's just true of any medical condition they have. If you feel your condition or injury is work-related, you should file a claim. We've got some people that, and not all of them are as clear-cut as like a broken leg, but there's, back injuries, there's other types of medical conditions that people have. I think this is work-related, I'm going to file a claim. And they should do that. We've urged it. And there's nothing there for prohibiting them or leading them otherwise that these claims would not have been considered, or they would have automatically been denied. There's nothing out there for that.
Mr. Chairman?
But I think we can both agree that the vaccine is something new. It's not a back injury or a broken leg. So while we would hope that everybody understands every rule, and this is a little different, and I think that's why some of this stuff is brought up. Go ahead, Chair Carter. Sorry.
As a matter of personal history, I'm against a year and a half going back, but I would much to be included in this amendment today. But I would feel much better if Sam and our lawyers were to discuss this and let us know what we are heading into before we vote on this today, because we don't know the consequences of this kind of action. And it's true that I am for members, for the best that is done for members, but I also need to be protective of my position as your chair in knowing what you're headed into, Mr. Chairman, today. And I would feel much more comfortable with that if we were not to, to vote on that under the circumstances.
And if I might speak, I really appreciate that, Chair Carter, because we talk about these rules in this setting, but I deal with the real life application of these rules. And I talk to these members when they are concerned about finding or providing information to support their claim. I hear from doctors who call and say, what do you mean? You want me to chime in on something that happened so long ago? I can't possibly do that. And what happens when we have to look back is it does place a burden on the member, on their providers, who often won't even speak to it because it is something that is really not heard of in any occupational setting, that they really look back that far from an incident. So I won't have the legal words to give you today. I'll leave that to the attorneys. But I will tell you that when it comes to what our members have to experience, when they walk into a doctor's office and they say, 8 months ago, I had an adverse reaction to a vaccine. Can you give me medical support for this claim? The doctors are going to, most of the doctors will say, I cannot help you with that. I didn't examine you. I don't know what your condition was. I can't tell you what you suffered. I can't qualify that for you. And then what it presents for our members is a problem and a false hope that going back retroactively is going to fix something. Now that is separate from the clear and convincing, but I do want to speak to that because I also care for the members' experiences as well. And I know that they can be put in a really challenging position when they are maybe availing themselves of rules that in practical application are challenging for them to meet.
Yeah, and I think everyone brought a lot of great points, and starting with the standards, I think I can be convinced to go with a consistent standard throughout the rule, right? But the one piece I'm still grappling with respect to this second proposal, which is to go retroactive, is really looking at the intent of this amendment. And so if the intent of the amendment is to encourage, and I've heard that, from the beginning of this, hearing, that the intent of this amendment is to bring security and comfort and encourage people to get vaccination, then I'm not quite sure why this would necessarily be that objective, because we're going retroactive. And so in thinking that, well, if members already have an avenue to file a claim for vaccination or side effects from vaccinations previously, then I'm not quite sure how that protection could not be availed, and we have to go with amendment to this provision to achieve that objective. And thirdly, I truly appreciate the police force and fire departments for risking their lives to protect the citizens, because that requires a very brave personality, and so I think they should be protected. But I'm just not necessarily convinced, and certainly I think I can be persuaded if there were evidence to that effect, but I'm just not convinced why we should go back and afford them with that protection when they already have the protection elsewhere. Because what I'm concerned about is that if we want to use that rationale that we need to go back to reward them because they stepped up, a lot could be said about the vaccine lottery, right? Earlier on, to encourage people to get vaccinated, states were giving out free scholarships or money. So, then how do we reconcile that, rationale? Again, because it's encourage people going forward to get vaccinated and not looking back. And that was never afforded as a benefit to those who had already been vaccinated. So I know it's a little different, set of circumstances, but with respect to this one, I just haven't heard a lot of convincing arguments, given the fact that members already have the means to file a claim prior to this amendment. And especially if the intent of this amendment is to encourage vaccination going forward. So.
Very good. Any more comments from the board?
I have a couple of thoughts. Here, hold on. I think I'm on mute. Nope, I'm not. I'd like to suggest that, well, if I'm understanding Chair Carter correctly, she was reticent to vote on the potential retroactive nature of this additional wording today. But are you supporting the decision to vote on the wording otherwise provided for subsection C? Or I'm comfortable with proceeding with that. So maybe someone could propose that we postpone decision or voting on that until we can have more discussion about the timeliness of submitting claims and the retroactive nature, but we could continue to vote on the other wording that was added and provided for discussion today. Number one. Secondly, I do want to compliment Mr. Hall on his spirited support and reasoning for the members and why this provision should be treated the same as other provision, the rest of this section on COVID-19 claims. I continue to not see it the same. I think a difference between how you contract a highly contagious virus and pinning that down to the source about whether it's related to your employment or not is completely distinct from an issue relating to a medical conditioning arising from taking a vaccine. I see them completely different. There's less unknown about one versus the other. However, so my position on that hasn't changed. However, and I'm also going to say I am not, while Attorney Luchin also said there's no risk of real creep involved in changing the standard for approving claims. That's not really in our purview here. I'm still reluctant to do things that appear that we're creeping on the methodology for determining whether a claim meets the requirement for being approved. I'm not particularly supportive of that. I think if preponderance of the claim and significant factors, these are terms that are developed and standardly used, I think that should apply to most things. However, in this very, very rare situation of COVID and its impact on our country and our city in particular, and those providing these safety services for the citizens of Portland, if there is any potential that changing the wording here to be clear and convincing as opposed to preponderance would motivate some people to feel less reluctant to get a vaccine, for that reason alone, I would support changing that wording. So.
Mr. Chairman, to answer Trustee Catherine's question, I'm very comfortable with voting on the information about clear and convincing. I'm that. I am not for the language of going back a year and a half. And so I don't understand the protocols here, Sam. So if you could give a little more clarity to this in terms of whether we vote today on the clear and convincing information and then I don't know how that works. And that's exactly why I wanted Jason to be in charge this year, because I don't know all the protocols, but I'm definitely not for going back a year and a half.
And that's absolutely why we have our wonderful staff and our legal counsel. They always come in and you'll do just fine next time. And you can always ask somebody a question, but I think it's not a year and a half. I think it's going back to December. So it's, where are we at? 10 months or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, Sam.
Yeah, it's December. So it'd be about 10 months. As we go forward, I want to give you the options of what you can do today, because we've seen some things batted around. So I've shared my screen again with you. This is the correct wording that you will be looking at today and casting your vote on. You have first option is to accept this wording as written, as we provided you. Second option is you can tweak it, and you wanted to change preponderance of evidence. Let's see if I can get that done. Anyway. Right in there anyway, pardon me, it didn't come across well, but anyway, you want to change that wording to clear and convincing. We can fit that in. We might have to change just a couple words around it, but we can do that if you want to vote it. So that's option 2. Option 3 could be adding the retroactive date to it. Option 4 is to do nothing and let this stand, which is the same thing as approving it. It stand and then come back later, because this is an unusual rule that I unilaterally put this rule into effect, which is in violation of the rules, but you can let me have my way by doing that. Or then your last option is to totally reject this altogether. So those are your really options. So the first one is take it as written. Second option is to change the preponderance of evidence to clear and convincing. The third is to change, I'm assuming that is to change the retroactive date, and you can do both preponderance or clear and convincing and the retroactive date if you want to in the same time. The other one is just to table it and leave, which by definition will leave this one in effect until you approve it or reject it. And your last is to totally reject it. So those are the options that are really on the table to you as you consider or make your motions to go ahead.
And Sam, this is just a really technical point, but I think this amendment would be to 5704 capital A sub 4 little c. As I'm looking at the rules online, just so that there isn't confusion later on. Just wanted to get that on the record.
Yeah, there should be an A up there, right? But we understand what this is. I understand. We'll make it in the right location. We need
just for the record. Yeah, we know where it goes.
So it should have 5704 should have A up here where my cursor is, and then it goes to 4. So you're correct there. Okay, that's a technical issue that will get cleared up when we write it, and we'll share with you the final wording that we have, because we'll put in clear and convincing, and I think we'll have to change 1 or 2 words around it to make that phrase fit in there correctly.
Okay, I'll take a stab at kind of paraphrasing what I'm getting from the board, and please step up if I'm misrepresenting anybody. But I think what I've heard is that we're looking to possibly vote on this resolution with changing from preponderance of the evidence to clear and convincing evidence, and not add the retroactive point at this time. So we'll do nothing at that end. I think this might be option 3, so what Sam was talking about. And then possibly coming back later with some more information from the board, or excuse me, from the fund next meeting might give us a little more information on the retroactive portion, and we could maybe talk about that again then. So that's not a motion, but if anybody's got any other ideas of how they'd like to do it, please speak up now or make a motion.
And just to clarify Trustee Lehman's point, so I just want to make sure. So in essence, then what we would be voting on is this language with or without the change in terms of the standard crew. But if we are in fact going to table whether to go retroactive or not, in essence, we still have to vote on this provision is effective on August 30th, 2021. And later on, if we were going to make this retroactive, then would be an amendment to this language, right? Okay, I just want to make sure I understand that.
Since you understood that so well, do you want to propose that as a?
I propose exactly what I just articulated. How's that? So I motioned that we amend the language to change the standard from preponderance of the evidence to clear and convincing evidence.
I second that.
I think technically we're supposed to make a motion first, but a friendly amendment there is fine, I think, before we vote.
And to clarify, we're talking about first accepting the wording, the additional wording as proposed in subsection C here, as shown on the screen, with the edit to remove the wording about preponderance of the evidence and instead substitute clear and convincing evidence.
Right. You don't need two votes. You can say we accept part C with the change in the area that I've highlighted.
Right. Yeah. I just want to make it clear that this wording in red has not already been approved.
No, it has not.
Addition now, in addition to, but with the edit to make it a different standard.
With that clarification, Mr. Chairman, I move that the motion would be accepted.
Okay, we have I'm assuming a motion from Chair Carter. Was that correct? Or were you seconding it? I'm sorry, I could barely hear you.
Well, I'm moving it forward because the motion is already in action. It has already been a second. And I'm saying with the clarification, I would move for the vote.
Excellent. I don't know if I heard the second, but if there's a second out there, I will accept it. And Chris, okay, perfect. So I guess we'll call for the vote. All those in favor of, I forget which number this even was. I'm gonna have to go back to page 1. Resolution 539 is amended. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries as amended. Thank you very much for your time on this. It took a long time, but I really appreciate it. Our members will appreciate it. And I'm glad people do take the time to think about these things and give us your opinions and your expertise. Okay, now we have a whole bunch of information items. Was there anything else, Sam, other than that?
No, those are all the action items that require a vote for that. So if we're going to information, the first one's state of FPDR. Let's see if we can get that.
Sam?
Yes.
Sam, Chief Boone and she's been waiting to participate on the state of FPDR.
Yes.
Chief Boone and Jacob Clark.
Correct. We have them there to participate. Typically, they'll do it at the end unless they have a time constraint, and we can have them make comments up front.
And Sam, did you have an end time on this meeting? Are we going to be able to fit anything in, or does everybody aware of our time? Because I didn't see it. Just says 1 o'clock. I didn't see the end time.
I think we've extended it a long time. Let me. I'll give you an option here. The November board meeting is going to be sparse with a few items because the state of FPDR can go to an hour, or if you have a lot of questions, an hour and a half. We have a bunch of new board members, so it may go longer. We can move that if you want to November and just hit the last couple of the other items that I need to go through with you today. And Jason, you're the chair, so I'll let you decide.
I would be okay with that. I don't know what everybody else's schedule is. I would be okay with moving that part to November unless there's an objection. Would somebody wants to get everything done today and have a really quick meeting on, but I can see this going till closer to 5 by looking at the agenda. So if anybody would like to weigh in on possibly adjusting the agenda.
I'm fine with it.
Go on. Go, Catherine.
I think Catherine.
I'm fine with postponing this particular section till the next meeting.
Chair Carter, were you going to say something?
No, I was just saying what were Catherine's thoughts, and I'm not sure if you think it's going to create a shorter meeting in November and it wouldn't go beyond 5 o'clock, 4:30. I could see us continuing today.
Okay. Does anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, this is James. I would prefer that we postpone the meeting because I'm super late for my 3 o'clock meeting because this meeting was scheduled from 1 to 3. So I would prefer that we postpone.
you're okay, Jason, we'll go ahead and postpone it and put that on the November meeting. There are a couple things that I do want to go over with you real quickly, because I just need some board input or board thoughts on a couple items. The first one is office space. Just want to let you know what we're doing with that. Our FPDR office lease expires April 2022. We've been in our present location for 25 years. The space is larger than we need. We have a huge room, we call it the boardroom, because that's where the board used to meet, was in our office, not in City Hall. And also the office was put together many years ago, and our space is not an efficient use of space with it. So it's 8,000 square feet. We don't need 8,000 square feet to do it. And further is that we are going to be moving to a hybrid telework model. And we'll go over that in November, explain what that is. That means we're going to have quite a few people teleworking, and the amount of people in the office will be reduced potentially at times by 50% or more. So taking this into account, we looked at different options for the future office space. One is to keep our present space. The second was move to a smaller office in the same building, about 5,200 square feet. So you're getting almost 3,000 square feet less. We can move into city-owned space. They have both large and small options given to us. Their smaller option was about 5,200, matching the small office version that's in the Harrison Square building, our present building. So of all these options, we evaluated them. We got spreadsheets of all the estimated costs for it. We've chosen to proceed with move to the smaller space in our present building. This option will save us approximately $85,000 a year in lease costs. It will allow us to configure an office to our needs rather than trying to shoehorn into existing walls, and more efficient use of space, more efficient support for teleworkers. The city of Portland wants all bureaus, including FPDR, to move into city-owned space. That's why we took a hard look at the options they presented to us. We felt those options were way too expensive and would not save it. One of them would cost us much more money a year than we pay now, and another one would save us some, but nowhere near 85,000. Commissioner Hardesty, she's our commissioner in charge of FPDR, so she's the one that we take all our issues to that are city issues or city council issues. She is saying that she supports this decision to going to a smaller space in her existing office versus move to city. Now, this is important to have her support because there could be some pushback from other commissioners and others in the city for this choice, and that will be my job to navigate through that with her support. Once we come up with a new lease, the lease will have to go in front of the city council. That's a requirement to have. They have to approve all leases for any bureau in the city. We will bring it to you because obviously you got to approve the funding. They actually approve the signing off of the lease itself. And with Commissioner Hardesty behind us, I'm certain we'll get the support we need to not have city-owned space. So a matter to just be upfront with you, there are moving costs, which include build out of the new office, getting new office furniture, because our furniture now has existed to hardwall offices, not to the modular cubicle type stuff that we'll be moving to. And there's actual move costs of physically getting stuff from one location to another, as well as actually closing out the existing office. That can be estimated about $400,000. We won't know all those exact costs until we get further in. So what I'm going to do, unless you disagree with the option we've chosen, we're going to proceed with that option, and we will provide you updates every meeting to where we are, and then later bring the contract or the lease to you for your approval on the paying the lease. So are there any questions on that?
Was there documentation for us on this in our book?
No, there wasn't.
Okay.
On this. We'll provide you more documentation. This is just to get our idea approved and our path approved. As we move through it, we'll be getting more figures, more in-depth information, and we'll be sharing that more in-depth information with you just as the informational piece on all the following board meetings.
Chairman, I am always for savings, and it appears to me that the technical staff has gone through and weighed the differences and what would be best in terms of the cost. I'd rather money to go to members than to go to brick and mortar. So I am definitely for what the staff has already investigated.
Okay, great, great. So I'm not seeing anything really. Anybody have any issues with going this route? Because if not, we're going to proceed with it.
Not at all.
Okay. So we're going to proceed with going down this path. We will bring you a lot more detail because now this will allow us to start negotiations and bring the detail forward, and we'll share that with you as we move ahead. Okay. And then one last topic. We've been talking about the City of Portland vaccine mandate, because as I said earlier, way on our discussion, is that as of August 30th, the city put in the employee vaccination policy requiring all city employees, except for sworn police officers, to either receive a vaccine or prove exemption by October 18th. Now, we are also looking at how this applies to other organizations the city works with. And the board, all city boards, including FPDR, falls under this purview. So we're looking at that now. I'm on the committee to make some decisions. So here's my impression of where the city's going to go. So when board meetings return to in-person public venues, in other words, when we move back into the city council chambers, the city will most likely require all board members, that being all of you, to have a vaccine or show proof of a recent negative COVID test. There's been no discussions of the logistics on how to verify proof of the vaccine or COVID test. That will be coming later. So I'll notify you when this moves ahead. We'll talk about options of what we can do if somebody does not want to get a vaccine or does not have a test. We are required by state statute to be able to hold all public meetings in a hybrid mode. So it could be that we have one of you participating via Zoom and the rest of the people in person. The whole city will be working on the logistics of making this happen. And that also applies to people who want to participate but not show up in public. We'll allow them, sort of like what Nelson did today, and hopefully we'll get the video problem fixed. So we'll see Nelson in his tie and suit next time. And we'll go from there. So I wanted you to be aware of, there will be I think this vaccine mandate will apply to you, but if you don't want to do it, we won't kick you off. You'll probably be required to come in via Zoom for the meeting. So we want to keep everybody on the board. So we do have a backup plan that doesn't mean termination from the board. And I'll do it as soon as those rules are pounded out. I'll share them with you. Any questions about that? Okay. I think we're done. So in November, we do have a couple of other administrative rule changes. These, for the most part, I hope won't take an hour and a half per rule. It should be pretty straightforward, but I'll knock on wood with that one. One has to do with updating our tax offset rules. If you don't know what tax offset is, you'll be educated next meeting. And also another one is to reflect the final pay. We've gone through all the different types of litigation and grievances on that, and we just need to bring the rules to match up to the charter. So that's more of a procedural one. Hopefully it doesn't do it. We should have some managed care organization contracts available for your review at that time. And then in January, we'll be doing the budget. So I've covered everything I need to cover. Stacy, anything exciting you want to go over on the summary?
The summary of board expenditures. We kind of talked a little bit about there. You have two reports this time. One is for just July, the first month of the new fiscal year, because they hadn't closed August yet when we sent the material to you. But so the more important one is the second one, which shows where we ended the prior fiscal year 2021, which wasn't available when we met in July. I know we've already had a really long meeting and we talked a little bit about that in July. So I'll just point out that shows expenditures against original budget, not against revised budget. So you can see, where we thought we'd be at the beginning of the year when we adopted the budget and where we wound up. And you'll see that we spent more on disability benefits than we expected to, and more on pension benefits than we expected to. But we did make a budget adjustment. We drew on the fund contingency that the board approved to offset those expenses during the year.
Yeah.
Sam?
But we have talked.
Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, Sarah Boone, Chief Boone, do you have some questions?
Sam, I just wanted to make a statement since you asked me and Chief Lavelle to be here. And so I think it's important to hear from the fire chief if you all have a couple minutes.
Sure. Absolutely, Chief.
Okay.
Does your camera work so we can see you? You don't have to, but.
We're having trouble with cameras on the attendees. We're gonna have to figure that problem out.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll work. Go ahead, Chief.
Okay, I just want to thank the Board of Trustees. My name is Sarah Boone, Fire Chief for the City of Portland, Portland Fire and Rescue. And I just want to ground everybody today as far as Portland Fire and Rescue and FPDR and everybody on this board and who we're here for, right? We all have worked over the last 18 months to really ensure a frontline workforce is protected. And if they get hurt or harmed on the job, that they are covered. And so I'd like to start by just thanking FPDR leadership and staff for your hard work and dedication. It's easy for those of us outside the Bureau to forget that you are a small team that has risen to the challenge. And we are grateful. I can't tell you how grateful, at least on Portland Fire side, that you guys have stepped up, because this is a once in a century pandemic, and it's a worldwide pandemic. And so when we talk about the work, the hours behind the scenes, when it comes to processing, we should be proud of FPDR. And I'm certain this past year has presented extra challenges as you've had to pivot from working on traditional injuries to those presented by COVID-19, because those other occupational injuries don't go away. The back sprains, the pain, the heart issues, the lung issues, the cancer, and they're still working through those as well. So I just wanted to start by thanking you all and letting you know that we're appreciative of your time and effort, and to make sure those of us on the front lines are adequately covered. As we move forward, it is my hope that as we collectively face new challenges and learn to evolve within a rapidly changing landscape, that we can find new ways of working collaboratively and in the best interest of our agencies and our fire and police workforce. And I will say, since last year, I just need to remind people, as this was a public health threat, it still is, there were the only preventative measures when it was community spread was to shut down the city, was to shut down the region, and was to shut down the state. And the only people that couldn't shut down were your first responders, your healthcare workers. We are part of the critical infrastructure that has to come to work every single day. We don't get the option to telework. And so they truly were on the front lines. The only thing, and this was a national effort that had the potential to protect them, aside from social distancing, wearing masks, or sheltering in place, which wasn't really feasible. And I can only speak for the fire side because of all the different types of emergency communications in situations where they couldn't wear a mask. So their life was truly on the line. From the president to the CDC, to the Oregon Health Authority, as well as to the local public health. The one thing that we had that would be somewhat protective was the vaccine. It was under emergency authorization. And at the time, we, as the largest health provider in the pre-hospital setting in the state, knew that we had the ability to vaccinate our employees. And so we had to apply and meet federal regulations in order to receive the vaccines, find a schedule that would work, and know that there were going to be adverse reactions because it was under emergency authorization, and the government was still collecting data. So this was a risk. But the alternative was death. That's what we were facing. And so the vaccinations offer protection. And what we know with the science, the evidence, and the research is the vaccine saves lives. And we also know that there was a sequential order in how the vaccines were distributed. And we also know that we are doing this under the federal guidance and not at the local level. And so to date, I just want to put the statistics for fire. There have been 181 firefighters that have died from the COVID-19 virus, 86 in 2020 and 95 in 2021. For law enforcement, it is 525 law enforcement officers that have died because of this virus, 340 in 2020 and 185 to date in 2021. And so as you guys are challenged with trying to find the wording for how we process injury, harm, or potential death on the job and look at benefits and coverage, it's not in the wording, it's in the intent. And every time when we create, whether it's an administrative rule and you guys, we adopt it, I just want to put out there that we have to be willing to adjust to meet the unknown challenges that we face today and we are going to face in the future. And so thank you for allowing me to speak, but I just want to acknowledge the incredible work in partnership with the local unions, working with the FPDR when it comes to reimagining how we cover fire and police. And just know that I'm just going to put it out there. Everybody should get vaccinated, but at the same time, we do know there are adverse reactions, and hopefully we can make that process as low barrier as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your kind and intelligent words. Was Chief Lavelle going to speak too?
He was invited, but he was unable to attend.
Was there somebody else?
No, they were looking to have somebody represent the police bureau, but nobody was, name was put forward by the time of the meeting. We'll give them an option if they want to come back in November and present their comments then.
I don't know if the chief is still on. Has anybody had any questions or comments for Chief Boone?
Well, Chief, on behalf of FPDR, we do want to thank for you and all your support staff and management staff to help us get through all of this stuff. I mean, we were presented with situations and quarantines and stuff that we've never dealt with before, and you hadn't either. So we were able to get a lot of information, a lot of help from you and your staff to figure out how to make these claims work and process claims. For everybody here, you're going to see some phenomenal numbers in the state of FPDR, the amount of COVID claims that came through. So that would have put Chief Boone's comments in a little bit of quantitative amounts. So just keep her comments in mind when you see these charts that we present in November.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And I'm just going to say one other thing because I have to address one of Jason's comments. And I will say as a fire chief, my number one responsibility is to ensure that all 31 fire stations remain open and that we can provide emergency operations or emergency response to every citizen within the city of Portland. And then we've also have to be able to meet the governor's conflagrations when it comes to wildfires. So I don't just look at a pandemic, I look at everything that's our responsibility and to ensure we have a workforce that can respond. With that being said, the number one threat was the coronavirus and COVID. And so for me, that protecting lives is not just an outward external mission, it's also internal. And so we adjusted when the vaccines came out and they were released. And so we had to pull everybody from their normal assignments, whether it was fire prevention, whether it was training, in order to vaccinate the majority of our bureau. And the reason I did that is, again, it is protecting life from death. And with our firefighters on the front line, it was, how do I shift an entire organization in order to vaccinate 85% of our department? So that took a lot of effort and time. And what I'm saying is the vaccines were not even available to the pharmacies. They weren't available to the health clinics. They were not available to anybody except for the hospital system. And so we were able to secure it just because of our sequence. And so this is not something, now that the vaccines are available at every pharmacy, at every health clinic, where you can go through your primary care, that's what wasn't available back in December. And so I just want to caution, it wasn't because of money that we had to look at. We knew that once you got vaccinated, you were going to have a reaction in order to build up antibodies. And some people had adverse reactions. But so somebody wasn't going into a burning structure and all of a sudden collapse because they were sick. We timed it. So if you were going to have a reaction, or you were sick, or you were building protection, it was at home and not in a fire or on an incident where you had the goal of saving somebody's life. We couldn't afford that failure. So that was a safety measure and not a cost saving. So I just want to put that on record. But again, the vaccines are available. They're widely available. As somebody said, we're incentivizing people just to get the shot. But Portland Fire, when it comes to our operations and where we are today, cannot make that major shift again. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief Boone from the board?
I just want to thank the chief for her service and for each of the members there for involved in taking care of our city. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Chair Carter. Appreciate it. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to excuse James because he's been just waiting hard to leave for another meeting that he has.
Thank you. But this is also a very important, purpose and requirement. So that's why I happily, stay on longer to accomplish my purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Thank you, Chair Carter. And James, you may leave, and you may leave anytime you like to. It's always nice, sometimes people have to leave meetings early. Just let us know, and we'll make sure you get all the information. All the votes are done, and I think we've completed all the business. So unless there's anything else, Sam or anybody else? All right. Well, we'll all see you in November. And I just wanted to say that on the state of FPDR, Sam and his staff puts a ton of time into that. And it's going to be a great opportunity for the new members to ask all kinds of questions and look through all the graphs. And I think it would do a disservice to try to rush it in today and not be able to get all that. So hopefully we can get it all done in November and people can learn a lot and we can get all the information. So with that, I adjourn the meeting. Any objections?
No.
All right. We'll see you all in November.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good afternoon.
Yeah.